Krix 7 had seen many things in his 3 cycles at the Galactic Military Academy. He had witnessed Thraxian cadets literally melt under pressure during combat simulations. He had watched Zentarian recruits cry tears of mercury when they failed their first xenobiology exam. Hell, he had even seen a Gorvac cadet accidentally eat his own homework, thinking it was lunch. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for humans. The briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as 24 alien cadets from across the galaxy fidgeted in their seats. Today marked their first interaction with the newest species to join the Academy, humans from a backwater planet called Earth. The rumors had been spreading like wildfire through the dormitories for weeks. "I heard they only live for 80 rotations," whispered Yara Prime, her crystalline features shimmering with anxiety. "My cousin's friend's roommate said they sweat poison," added Thok 5, his 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession. Krix 7 rolled his own 6 eyes and adjusted his uniform. As a Nexarian, he prided himself on logical thinking and careful observation. These wild stories about humans were probably just typical Academy gossip, blown out of proportion by cadets who had too much time and too little actual information. The door hissed open, and in walked their instructor, Commander Vex Prime, followed by 3 beings that looked surprisingly ordinary. "Cadets, meet your new human classmates," Commander Vex Prime announced in his usual monotone. "They will be integrating into your Advanced Tactical Studies program." The first human was tall and lean, with short brown hair, and what Krix 7 would later learn were called freckles, scattered across pale skin. The second was shorter, with darker skin and an easy smile that somehow made Krix 7's defensive spines relax slightly. The third was a female, medium height with auburn hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. "I'm Marcus Webb," the tall one said, his voice carrying an odd musical quality that most species translators couldn't quite capture. "This is Jaden Torres, and she's Nora Kane." The female, Nora, stepped forward with a confidence that made several alien cadets take an unconscious step back. "Looking forward to working with all of you," she said, and there was something in her tone that made Krix 7's thermal sensors spike with interest. "Now then," Commander Vex Prime continued, "you will be divided into mixed species teams for the upcoming War Games simulation. Krix 7, you will partner with Cadet Kane." "Perfect, just perfect." Krix 7 had been hoping to work with Yara Prime, or maybe Thok 5, someone whose combat capabilities he understood. Instead, he got stuck with the unknown quantity. As the other cadets dispersed to meet their new partners, Krix 7 approached Nora with what he hoped was professional courtesy. Up close, he could see more details about human physiology. Their skin was remarkably smooth compared to most species, and those small brown spots on her arms were apparently normal coloration, not some kind of disease. "So," he said, trying to break the awkward silence, "I have studied human military history. Your species seems to have a talent for creative problem-solving." Nora's lips curved upward in what he recognized as a smile, though something about it made his survival instincts twitch. "That's one way to put it." "The Academy records indicate humans have never lost a simulation exercise." Krix 7 continued, genuinely curious now. "How is this possible? Your technology is at least 2 centuries behind most member species." "Oh, you know," Nora said casually, examining her fingernails, "we just have our little tricks." That was when Krix 7 noticed it. A small, dark mark on the left side of her neck. Just below her ear, it was perfectly round, about the size of a Nexarian thumb pad, and so dark it seemed to absorb light. His thermal sensors immediately locked onto it. The mark was exactly 2.3 degrees warmer than the surrounding skin, which was odd. Most scars or birthmarks registered as slightly cooler tissue. "What is that mark on your neck?" he asked, before his brain could engage his diplomatic protocols. Nora's hand instinctively moved toward the spot, then stopped. Her smile shifted, becoming something that made Krix 7's combat training suddenly seem very inadequate. "A kill that took too long," she said simply. The words hung in the air between them, like a live plasma charge. Krix 7's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, his brain trying to process this information through the lens of everything he thought he knew about humans. "I beg your pardon? You heard me correctly." Nora's tone was conversational, as if she were discussing the weather or lunch options. "That particular target required more time than I usually prefer to invest." Krix 7's defensive spine started to rise involuntarily. In all his research on human culture, he had never encountered anything about ritual scarification or trophy marking. According to the files, humans were supposed to be relatively peaceful, having only recently abandoned large-scale warfare on their homeworld. "Target?" he managed to ask. Nora stretched her arms above her head, and Krix 7 noticed that her movements had a predatory grace that none of the Academy instructors had mentioned in their briefings. Combat exercise on Luna Base 3. My opponent was a Cardathian shock trooper. Big guy. Really big. About twice your size, actually. She paused to examine something on her uniform sleeve, as if the conversation were boring her. "Cardathians are known for their resilience," she continued. "This one took 17 minutes to go down. Usually, I prefer to wrap these things up in under 5, but he was particularly stubborn. Left quite an impression." Krix 7's thermal sensors were now screaming warnings as his brain tried to reconcile this casual admission with everything he thought he knew about human physiology. Cardathian shock troopers were apex predators, bred for combat on high-gravity worlds. They stood nearly 3 meters tall and could punch through reinforced battle armor with their bare hands. "You killed a Cardathian shock trooper?" he asked weakly. "Well, it was a training exercise, so killed is a strong word," Nora said with a shrug. "But, yes, I neutralized him. The mark is from where his claw caught me during his final, desperate attempt to take me down with him. Funny thing about desperate opponents, they always seem to aim for the neck." She touched the mark again, and this time her smile was absolutely predatory. "The medical team said it would fade completely within a few weeks, but I asked them to leave it. Call it a reminder." "A reminder of what?" "That sometimes the prey fights back harder than you expect." Krix 7 felt his combat protocols engaging automatically, flooding his system with adrenaline analogs and sharpening his sensory input. This human female had just casually admitted to not only defeating, but marking herself with a trophy from combat against one of the galaxy's most feared warrior species. And she had called the Cardathian prey. "I think," he said carefully, "that I may have underestimated human combat capabilities." "Most species do," Nora replied cheerfully. "It's actually quite useful. Elements of surprise and all that." The simulation alarm chimed, indicating that their first exercise would begin in 30 minutes. Around them, other mixed teams were chatting nervously or reviewing tactical data on their portable units. "So," Nora said, pulling out her own tactical display, "what do you know about Vraxian hive tactics?" "According to the brief, we are going up against a team of 6 Vraxian warrior drones in a urban pacification scenario." Krix 7 tried to focus on the tactical information, but his eyes kept drifting back to that mark on her neck. The implications were staggering. If humans could casually defeat Cardathian shock troopers in single combat, what else were they capable of? Vraxians typically rely on overwhelming numerical superiority and coordinated attacks, he said, falling back on his training. They communicate through pheromone signals and can coordinate complex maneuvers without verbal communication. "Right," Nora nodded, studying the tactical layout. "And they have that whole hive mind thing going on, so if you disrupt their pheromone communication, they become confused and disorganized." Theoretically, yes. But disrupting Vraxian pheromone communication requires specialized equipment that we will not have access to in this simulation. Nora's smile widened. Who said anything about equipment? Before Krix 7 could ask what she meant, the preparation alarm sounded. They had 15 minutes to gear up and review their mission parameters. The armory was a hive of activity, as cadets selected their preferred weapons and equipment loadouts. Krix 7 gravitated toward the standard Nexarian configuration: energy rifle, tactical scanner, emergency medical kit, and defensive shield generator. Nora, meanwhile, seemed to be building her loadout based on some criteria that made no sense to him. She selected a basic kinetic rifle, the kind most species used for training rather than serious combat. Then she added what appeared to be a random assortment of utility items: zipline anchors, emergency flares, a basic field knife, and several containers of what the inventory system listed as nutritional supplements. Are you planning to have lunch during the combat simulation? Krix 7 asked, genuinely confused. Something like that, Nora replied, shouldering her equipment pack with ease. The simulation arena was a faithful recreation of a typical urban environment. Multi-level buildings, narrow alleyways, civilian population markers, and plenty of cover. Their mission briefing was straightforward: extract a high-value target from a building controlled by hostile forces while minimizing collateral damage and civilian casualties. The Vraxian team would have a 15-minute head start to establish their defensive positions. Standard Academy doctrine suggested a careful, methodical approach: reconnaissance, identification of enemy positions, coordinated assault with supporting fire. Krix 7 said as they took their starting positions. I suggest we begin with a wide reconnaissance sweep to identify their defensive. Nah, Nora interrupted, checking something on her wrist display. That will take too long, and they will have time to call in reinforcements from the secondary scenario teams. But Academy Protocol clearly states, Academy Protocol assumes you are dealing with typical opponents using typical tactics, Nora said, and there was something in her voice that made Krix 7's spines bristle with anticipation. Vraxians have excellent hearing, thermal vision, and can communicate silently. But they also have some interesting limitations that most species do not think to exploit. The starting signal echoed across the arena. Somewhere in the urban maze ahead of them, 6 Vraxian warrior drones were waiting with whatever weapons and equipment their species favored for close-quarters combat. Nora immediately started moving, not toward the target building, but toward a completely different section of the arena. Where are you going? Krix 7 called, hurrying to keep up. The target is in Sector 7. I know where the target is, Nora said without slowing down. But first, we need to have a little conversation with our opponents. She led him through a series of service tunnels that ran beneath the simulated city. Krix 7's tactical scanner showed no Vraxian signatures in their immediate area, which made sense. The warrior drones would be focused on defending the target building, not patrolling empty maintenance areas. Here, Nora said, stopping at what appeared to be a completely unremarkable junction of service tunnels. Here what? Here is where we set up our little surprise. She started unpacking her equipment, and Krix 7 realized that her seemingly random selection of gear was actually part of a carefully planned strategy. Vraxians communicate through airborne pheromone signals, she explained, opening one of her nutritional supplement containers. The smell that emerged made Krix 7's sensory organs recoil in disgust. But they also have incredibly sensitive olfactory systems, much more sensitive than most species realize. What is that? He asked, covering his breathing vents. Concentrated garlic extract, mixed with capsaicin, and a few other organic compounds that humans find merely unpleasant, but most other species find overwhelming, Nora said cheerfully. Emergency survival rations from Earth. Apparently, our ancestors developed quite a taste for foods that would kill most other life forms. She was rigging the containers to the emergency flares, creating what appeared to be some kind of dispersal system. The building's ventilation system connects to these service tunnels, she continued, consulting her tactical display. If we introduce this mixture into their air supply, it will not only disrupt their pheromone communication, but also cause significant sensory overload. That seems... Krix 7 paused, trying to find the right words. That seems like biological warfare. Biological warfare would be using actual toxins or pathogens, Nora corrected. This is more like aggressive seasoning. The implications of what she was suggesting started to sink in. Not only was she planning to chemically disable their opponents, but she had come to the academy prepared for exactly this type of unconventional tactics. How did you know we would face Vraxians in our first simulation? He asked. Nora's smile was answer enough. Somehow, she had obtained advance information about their training scenarios, which raised even more questions about human intelligence-gathering capabilities. Ready? She asked, her finger hovering over the flare ignition switch. Krix 7's tactical training warred with his growing fascination. This was completely outside standard academy protocols, but it was also brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of facing 6 coordinated warrior drones in direct combat, they would be dealing with 6 confused, sensory-overloaded individuals. Do it, he said. The flares ignited, and within seconds, the tunnel system filled with a smell so intense that Krix 7's defensive systems automatically sealed his breathing vents. The mixture spread through the ventilation system like a toxic cloud, and almost immediately, his tactical scanner started picking up signs of chaos from the target building. Now we go, Nora said, shouldering her rifle and heading back toward the surface. The scene in Sector 7 was like something from a fever dream. 6 Vraxian warrior drones, each normally capable of coordinated, silent combat, were stumbling around the target building in complete disarray. Their pheromone communication had been completely disrupted, and their enhanced sensory organs were overloaded by the chemical assault. 2 of them were actually attacking each other, apparently unable to distinguish friend from foe through the olfactory chaos. Target building, 3rd floor, northeast corner, Nora said, consulting her display. Should be a straight run now. It was almost embarrassingly easy. The Vraxians were so disoriented that Nora and Krix 7 walked past them without being challenged. The high-value target, a holographic simulation of a Zentarian diplomat, was exactly where the mission briefing had indicated. Simulation complete, the arena's computer announced. Mission accomplished with 0 casualties and minimal collateral damage. Time to completion, 8 minutes, 37 seconds. As they emerged from the building with their rescued diplomat, Krix 7 could see other mixed teams throughout the arena still engaged in conventional tactical approaches. Most were probably going to take at least another 20 minutes to complete their objectives, assuming they succeeded at all. New academy record? Nora observed casually, checking her equipment. Not bad for our first day. How? Krix 7 asked. How did you know exactly what to bring? Exactly what would work against Vraxians? Exactly where to find the building's ventilation access? Nora looked at him for a long moment, and he realized that she was evaluating him, deciding how much to reveal. Humans have been studying at this academy for exactly 4 months, she said finally. In that time, every single mixed team with a human member has set new performance records in combat simulations. Do you think that is a coincidence? No, I suppose it is not. We do our homework, Krix 7. Very, very thoroughly. They walked back toward the debriefing area, and Krix 7 found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about human capabilities. It was not just their physical prowess or their tactical creativity. They were operating on a completely different level of preparation and intelligence gathering. That mark on your neck, he said suddenly. It is not from a training exercise, is it? Nora stopped walking and turned to face him. For the first time since they had met, her casual demeanor slipped slightly. and he caught a glimpse of something much more dangerous underneath. "No," she said quietly, "it is not. What really happened?" She was quiet for so long that he thought she was not going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that made his thermal sensors spike with alarm. There was a situation, before humans joined the Academy. A diplomatic mission that went very, very wrong. The debriefing room felt different now. Commander Vex Prime stood at the front, his usual stoic expression replaced by something that looked suspiciously like bewilderment. Behind him, a holographic display showed the combat simulation results, and the numbers made several alien cadets whisper in disbelief. 8 minutes and 37 seconds, the commander announced. This represents a 73% improvement over the previous Academy record. Krix 7 glanced at Nora, who sat beside him with the same casual expression she had worn all day, as if breaking Academy records was just another Tuesday afternoon activity. Furthermore, Commander Vex Prime continued, the tactical approach employed was unconventional. Cadet Kane, would you care to explain your methodology? Nora stood up with fluid grace. Certainly, Commander. We identified the primary weakness in Vraxian sensory systems and exploited it using available resources. Standard asymmetric warfare principles. You chemically disabled 6 warrior drones using what the inventory system lists as food seasoning. Emergency rations, actually. But yes, that is accurate. Thok 5 raised one of his 4 hands. But how did you know it would work? Vraxian physiology is not covered until advanced xenobiology next semester. Nora's smile was perfectly innocent. Lucky guess? The lie was so obvious that even the most gullible cadets shifted uncomfortably. Commander Vex Prime's expression suggested he was beginning to suspect that human integration into the Academy might be more complicated than originally anticipated. Class dismissed, he said, finally. Cadet Kane, please remain for additional consultation. As the other students filed out, Krix 7 hesitated. Nora caught his eye and nodded slightly toward the door. Go ahead, she said. I will catch up with you later. But instead of leaving, Krix 7 found himself lingering in the corridor outside the debriefing room. His enhanced hearing could pick up fragments of the conversation inside, and what he heard made his defensive spines rise. He and Ozenzain, completely outside established. Protocols. Intelligence-gathering capabilities that exceed. Need to understand what we are dealing with. 20 minutes later, Nora emerged, looking completely unruffled. She found Krix 7 waiting by the Academy's observation deck, staring out at the star field beyond the station's massive viewport. Waiting for me? She asked, settling into the chair beside him. The commander seemed concerned. Commanders are paid to be concerned. It is their primary job function. Krix 7 turned to study her profile. In the starlight, the mark on her neck seemed even more prominent, a dark circle against pale skin. You were going to tell me about the diplomatic mission? He said. Nora was quiet for a long moment, watching a supply ship dock with one of the station's outer pylons. You really want to know? Yes. It will change how you see humans, how you see me. I think that process already started today, she laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fair enough, but this stays between us, understood? The Academy does not need to know everything about human capabilities. Not yet. Krix 7 nodded, though something in her tone made his thermal sensors spike with anticipation. 6 months ago, Nora began, before humans officially joined the Galactic Council, there was a first contact situation that went sideways. A human diplomatic vessel was sent to negotiate mining rights with a previously unknown species called the Hegemony of Keth. She paused to check something on her wrist display, a habit Krix 7 was beginning to recognize as her way of gathering her thoughts. The Keth were impressive. 3-meter-tall apex predators with natural armor plating and claws that could slice through battle steel. They had conquered 17 systems and enslaved the populations. Very straightforward approach to diplomacy. What happened? What always happens when someone mistakes human diplomacy for weakness? Nora said, her voice carrying that same predatory edge he had noticed during their combat simulation. They decided to make an example of us. The supply ship finished docking, and automated cargo systems began transferring materials. The routine nature of the activity somehow made Nora's story feel even more ominous. The Keth War Prime, a being called Thex Supremacy, invited our diplomatic team to a formal ceremony. Traditional hospitality, cultural exchange, all very civilized, except the ceremony turned out to be a public execution. Krix 7's 6 eyes widened. They killed human diplomats? They tried to, Nora corrected. The plan was to execute the entire team as a demonstration of Keth superiority, then broadcast the recording throughout human space as a warning. Very dramatic, very effective psychological warfare. But obviously it did not work. Nora's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. No, it did not work at all. She stood up and moved to the viewport, pressing one hand against the transparent aluminum. I was part of the diplomatic security detail. Standard protocol, 3 guards for a 6-person diplomatic mission. We were supposed to be ceremonial, a show of respect rather than actual protection. Let me guess, Krix 7 said dryly. The Keth underestimated human security procedures, among other things. Nora traced patterns on the viewport with her finger. The execution was scheduled to take place in their primary governmental complex, in front of 10,000 Keth citizens, and broadcast live across their empire. Maximum psychological impact. What did you do? What we were trained to do. Her voice became matter-of-fact, as if she were describing routine maintenance procedures. We killed them all. The words hung in the air between them like a live energy weapon. Krix 7's brain struggled to process what she had just said. All? Every single Keth in that complex. War Prime, Thex Supremacy, his command staff, the ceremonial guards, the broadcast technicians. Everyone. Many? 3,417, Nora said without hesitation. I counted. Krix 7's thermal sensors were screaming warnings as his combat protocols tried to evaluate the threat level of the being sitting next to him. 3 humans had somehow eliminated over 3,000 apex predators in a single engagement. How is that possible? Nora turned away from the viewport and sat back down. For the first time since he had met her, she looked tired. Humans have been at war for our entire recorded history, she said quietly. We have refined the art of killing to a level that most species cannot even comprehend. When someone threatens our diplomats, our response is not diplomatic. But the numbers are irrelevant when you understand the tactical situation properly. Her training instructor voice was back. The Keth were apex predators on their homeworld, but they had never faced systematic warfare. They understood individual combat, pack hunting, territorial disputes. They had no concept of coordinated military operations. She pulled out her tactical display and began sketching a rough floor plan. The governmental complex was designed for ceremony, not defense. Multiple levels, numerous access points, civilian populations mixed with military targets. The Keth had positioned themselves for maximum dramatic effect, not maximum security. Even so, 3 humans against 3,000. 3 humans with detailed architectural plans, comprehensive intelligence on Keth physiology, and absolutely no intention of playing by their rules, Nora corrected. Plus, we had something they did not expect. Which was human emergency protocols. She highlighted several points on her improvised floor plan. When a human diplomatic mission is threatened, our response doctrine is very simple. Eliminate the threat, extract our personnel, and ensure the incident cannot be repeated. That sounds like every species' emergency protocol. No, Nora said, and her smile was absolutely terrifying. Most species try to minimize casualties and preserve diplomatic relationships. Human emergency protocols prioritize one thing above all else, which is making sure nobody ever threatens human diplomats again. The implications started to sink in. Krix 7 realized he was not just talking to a skilled combat veteran. He was sitting next to someone who had participated in what amounted to genocide. "The mark on your neck," he said slowly. "War Prime Thek Supremacy," Nora confirmed. He was the last one alive in the complex. Took 17 minutes to bring him down because he kept trying to negotiate. Apparently, watching his entire command structure get systematically eliminated had given him new perspectives on diplomacy. "You fought him hand to hand?" "Eventually, after we ran out of more efficient options." She touched the mark again. "He was tough. I will give him that." Most Keth went down in under 3 minutes once we engaged them individually. But Thek Supremacy had combat experience, tactical training, and genuine survival instincts. What happened to the rest of the Keth Empire? Nora's expression became businesslike again. 3 days after the incident, human battle fleets arrived at every major Keth system simultaneously. The Empire surrendered unconditionally within 6 hours. How many fleets? All of them. Krix 7 felt his world shift slightly as the full scope of human capabilities became clear. The species that had been admitted to the Academy as promising newcomers had, in fact, conquered an entire interstellar empire in less than a week. So, when humans applied to join the Galactic Council, he said slowly, it was not really a request. "Oh, it was definitely a request," Nora said cheerfully. "We are very polite about these things. But yes, the Council understood that refusing might lead to additional diplomatic complications." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel slowly past the observation deck. Krix 7's mind was racing, reassessing everything he thought he knew about galactic politics, Academy training protocols, and the nature of human civilization. "Why tell me all this?" he asked finally. "Because you are my partner," Nora said simply, "and because sooner or later, every species in the galaxy is going to figure out what humans are really capable of. Better that our allies know the truth from the beginning. And if I decide I do not want to be allied with a species of genocidal predators?" Nora considered this seriously. That would be unfortunate, but understandable. Most species find human capabilities disturbing once they understand the full scope. But you should consider the alternative, which is being allied with the species that treats genocide as a diplomatic option rather than being in their way when they decide someone needs to be removed from the galactic community. The logic was unassailable and absolutely terrifying. How many other species know about human military capabilities? The Council leadership knows. Most species intelligence services have figured out the basics. But the general population across the galaxy still thinks we are primitive newcomers who got lucky. And you prefer it that way. We prefer that beings who might threaten human interests understand exactly what the consequences would be, Nora said. Everyone else can believe whatever makes them comfortable. A soft chime indicated that evening meal period was beginning. Around them, other cadets were leaving their study areas and heading toward the mess hall. "So," Nora said, standing and stretching, "are we still partners? Or do you need to request a transfer?" Krix 7 looked at her for a long moment. The human female, who had casually described participating in the systematic elimination of over 3,000 beings, who carried a trophy mark from personal combat with an apex predator, who belonged to a species that had conquered an empire and then politely asked to join the galactic community. "Partners?" he said finally. "Good." Her smile was warm and genuinely friendly. "Because tomorrow we have advanced starship tactics, and I hear Commander Zelk 9 likes to use Cardathian battle formations in his simulations. Do you happen to have intelligence on Cardathian tactical weaknesses as well?" Krix 7, Nora said, heading toward the mess hall. We have intelligence on everyone's tactical weaknesses. That is what makes us such good allies. As they walked down the corridor together, Krix 7 realized that his perspective on humans, on the Academy, and on galactic politics had been fundamentally altered in the space of a single day. The mark on Nora's neck was not just a trophy from a difficult fight. It was a reminder that humans approached conflict with a level of thoroughness that most species found incomprehensible. They did not just win battles, they eliminated the possibility of future battles. "One more question," he said, as they joined the line for evening meal. "Shoot. When humans eventually decide they no longer need the Academy, or the Council, or any of the rest of galactic civilization, what happens to the rest of us?" Nora paused, her meal tray halfway to the serving station. When she looked at him, her expression was completely serious. "That, my friend, is a question you should hope never needs an answer." She moved on to select her food, leaving Krix 7 standing in line with the uncomfortable realization that he had just partnered with a member of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. And somehow, that felt like the safest possible position to be in. The story of the mark that took too long was not really about 17 minutes of combat with an alien war leader. It was about the moment when humanity announced to the galaxy that threatening human interests would result in consequences beyond most species' ability to imagine. Nora Kane wore that mark as a reminder, but not the kind Krix 7 had originally assumed. It was not a reminder of a difficult victory. It was a reminder of what happened when humans decided someone had become a problem that needed solving. And as Krix 7 followed his human partner through the mess hall, he found himself hoping that humanity would never decide he was a problem that needed solving. Because he was beginning to understand that when humans solved problems, they stayed solved. Permanently.